Welcome back to Amazing Stories, where we tell you stories in an incredible way. Today we bring you a fearsome hitman, Popeye. In the dark labyrinth of organized crime that plagued Colombia in the last decades of the 20th century, few figures embodied brutality and blind loyalty like Jhon Jairo Velásquez Vásquez. Known by the alias Popeye, he was not the architect of a drug empire nor the financial strategist. He was, essentially, the executioner, the man whose steady hand carried out the orders of the most powerful and bloodthirsty drug lord in history, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. His life, a descent into the depths of evil, is a story worth unraveling to understand the magnitude of the violence that devastated a nation. The story of Popeye was forged in an environment of hardship and hopelessness. He was born in Yarimo, a municipality in Antioquia, in 1962. His youth was far from peaceful. He grew up in a turbulent country, where illegality often appeared to be the only way out or up. From a very young age, he showed an inclination toward activities outside the law, beginning his criminal path with minor offenses, thefts, and robberies. However, he possessed a dangerous mix of street smarts and an apparent emotional coldness that would set him apart. Paradoxically, Jhon Jairo's first formal encounters with discipline and structure took place in state institutions. He had a brief stint in the Colombian Navy and later entered the General Santander Police Cadet School. These experiences, though short-lived, gave him basic knowledge of strategy, weapons handling, and discipline, tools that, tragically, he would later use in the service of brutality. It was during this period, or shortly after, that his path crossed with the emerging and brutal organization of Pablo Escobar, the Medellín Cartel. His rise within the Medellín Cartel was meteoric, built on absolute loyalty and effectiveness in carrying out orders. Contrary to what is sometimes mistakenly claimed, Popeye was never part of the Cali Cartel, Escobar's rival group. His loyalty was to the boss. He started out as a simple hitman, a hired gun, willing to get his hands bloody for money and respect. But his criminal intelligence, his cold-bloodedness in crucial moments, and above all, his willingness to carry out any order without question earned him Escobar's trust. Soon, he stopped being just another link in the chain and became one of the chief hitmen, coordinating groups, planning attacks, and making sure the boss's orders were carried out to the letter. In many ways, he was the visible and ruthless face of Escobar's violent power. Popeye's criminal record is a reflection of the madness and cruelty of the Medellín Cartel in its war against the Colombian state. He himself, in later confessions, claimed to have directly participated in the deaths of at least 250 people and to have coordinated or been aware of more than 3,000 murders. Figures that, while chilling, are difficult to fully verify, but they give an idea of the magnitude of his involvement. Kidnappings were a tool of pressure and terror used by Escobar. Popeye was directly involved in the kidnapping of highly prominent public figures. The kidnapping of Andrés Pastrana Arango in January 1988 was a bold blow against the Colombian political class, a demonstration of strength and contempt for authority. Days later, there was another kidnapping, even more infamous, that of the Attorney General of the nation, Carlos Mauro Hoyos. Popeye confessed to being the one who intercepted the official vehicle and, following direct orders from Escobar, executed the high-ranking official, an act of barbarity that shattered any hope of negotiation and unleashed even more fury in the war. The war declared by Escobar against the state meant pure terrorism. Popeye was the key player in this strategy of chaos. The coordination of hundreds of car bombs in the main cities of the country, targeting government buildings, police stations, and even civilian areas, spread panic and claimed thousands of innocent lives. The attack on the DS building, the Administrative Department of Security, in 1989, and the bombing of the Avianca airplane that same year, with 107 people on board, are just two examples of the scale of violence in which Popeye was directly or indirectly involved. It was a time of horror, where human life seemed to have no value for those who held the power of the mafia. The fall of Pablo Escobar's empire and the relentless pressure from the state-led Jhon Jairo Velásquez, alias Popeye, to a fate that, for many of his own, meant either oblivion or death, prison. In 1992, Popeye turned himself into the authorities, marking the beginning of one of the longest and most defining chapters of his controversial life. His initial sentence covered serious crimes: terrorism, drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit crimes with terrorist aims, and homicide. Although one source mentions a sentence of 24 years and 3 months, another places it at 23 years and 3 months, handed down in 2008 for other cases. In total, Popeye served a little over 23 years behind bars. But imprisonment for a man like Popeye didn't mean peace. It meant a new battlefield. Prison, especially the National Model Prison, became a microcosm of the violence he had left behind. Popeye was involved in fierce armed clashes in the Modelo during the years 2000 and 2001. He confessed to having actively participated in the two fiercest wars that took place there, where he managed to form a large army of about 800 men amid chaos filled with the dead and the missing, all made possible by an arsenal of weapons that inexplicably proliferated inside the prison. In this brutal environment, survival demanded a strategy. His book details this internal struggle, the multiple assassination attempts, the torture, the temporary alliances, and the constant betrayals. Surprisingly, in prisons like Colombia and Tremacua, where he was held, Popeye encountered former mortal enemies, such as the Rodriguez brothers from the Cali cartel. The forced coexistence, according to his account, led him to look at them with a strange kind of respect, understanding that the fight inside was simply about survival. He claimed that he sought to show he respected the mafia's hierarchies and that his thirst for power and money had ended with his surrender. Despite his talk of change, the illegal world never completely left him while in prison. Sources indicate that Popeye was found guilty of trafficking illegal drugs, more murders, and extortion from within the prison. This suggests that even behind bars, he maintained connections to the outside and continued participating in criminal activities, blurring the line between punishment and the continuation of crime. Beyond the violence, prison was also, according to Popeye, a place of apparent transformation and business. He continued his studies, earning 14 diplomas, including one as a certified environmental restorer. But perhaps his most notable activity was becoming the narrator of his own story. In his book Surviving Pablo Escobar, co-written with Astrid Legarda, he recounts his years in prison and offers his perspective on the golden and bloody era of the Medellín Cartel. He describes how he lost the immense power he once had alongside Escobar, becoming just a number in the prison system, T007. The strict supervision in prisons like Colombia, under American guidelines, is detailed in his account. We want to know your opinion about this. What do you think? Not just about Popeye, but also about the way we told you the story. If you want us to improve in any way, let us know in the comments. And if you like what we do, leave a like and subscribe. It's a way to show appreciation for these stories. Thank you. In his narrative, Popeye presents himself as a passive and analytical observer of prison events, interacting with a macabre gallery of characters, other famous drug traffickers, corrupt politicians, paramilitaries, and guerrilla fighters. He used these encounters as a pretext to weave stories about these individuals' pasts and their connection to Colombia's complex social crisis. To tell his story, he mostly chose to use the third person in his book, presenting himself almost as a secondary character in his own account, which, according to some analyses, gave it an air of objectivity or perhaps allowed him to distance himself from the seriousness of his actions. Only in a preliminary text did he use the first person to ask for forgiveness. After serving more than 23 years of a sentence that few believed he would live to see the end of, the doors of the maximum security prison in Colombia opened for Jhon Jairo Velásquez in August 2014. The man who had been Pablo Escobar's deadly shadow, the mastermind behind countless murders and terrorist acts, was returning to the streets he once filled with terror. But what happened next was as bewildering as it was revealing of Colombia's complex scars. Far from going unnoticed or facing unanimous rejection, Popeye found himself in a paradoxical reality. While for many his release reopened deep wounds and was seen as an affront to the memory of the victims, for others he had become a strange kind of celebrity. He walked the streets of Medellín and elsewhere with a surprising calm, almost as if the weight of his crimes didn't follow him in public. And the reaction from some people was astonishing. People would approach him, ask for photos, autographs, as if he were a movie star or a sports hero. His figure, tainted by the darkness of his past, held a morbid fascination for a segment of society. This duality was chilling. While entire families were still mourning their loved ones, victims of the crimes that Popeye had confessed to or helped carry out, a part of Colombia seemed willing to forget, or perhaps even admire, the man behind the myth of the Hitman. His chilling stories, once whispered in secrecy, were now becoming material of public interest. How was it possible that a confessed murderer could provoke such a reaction? Popeye, shrewd as ever, quickly realized the immense, though twisted, capital that his past represented. He launched himself into media stardom with calculated audacity. He started his own YouTube channel where, in front of millions of viewers, he shared his version of the story, the raw details of his crimes, and the inner workings of the Medellín Cartel. He presented himself as a changed man, repentant, who wanted to guide young people so they wouldn't follow in his footsteps. But deep down, he continued to recount his criminal exploits with a chilling coldness, almost with a hidden pride. He published books, gave non-stop interviews, keeping himself in the spotlight. It was a complex and painful social phenomenon. For many Colombians, the admiration or fascination with Popeye was incomprehensible and offensive. How could anyone admire someone responsible for so much suffering? Was it a sign that society had normalized violence, or was it simply human curiosity in the face of evil incarnate? Opinions were polarized. There was the media Popeye, the repentant YouTuber, and the real Popeye, the ruthless hitman who had destroyed countless lives. He walked among us, a living reminder of a dark era, wrapped in an aura of notoriety that made him as visible as he was detestable to many and strangely attractive to others. His parole and the way he lived it highlighted the deep and painful contradictions of a society still struggling to heal the wounds of the past, while some of its darkest figures parade under the spotlight. The paradox of Popeye, the hitman both loved and hated, was an uncomfortable mirror of Colombia's recent history. But the shadow of his past, and perhaps his criminal nature, caught up with him once again. Despite his public statements of remorse, the authorities began investigating new illegal activities. The prosecutor's office requested the revocation of his parole. On May 25, 2018, Popeye was arrested again. The charges were serious: aggravated extortion and aggravated conspiracy to commit a crime. Families connected to drug traffickers accused him of extorting them, threatening their lives if they didn't pay. A possible connection between his criminal enterprises and the feared gang La Oficina was investigated. He was sent back to prison, initially to Valledupar prison, La Tramacula, while the case proceeded. This second stay in prison would be his last. In early October 2018, it became known that Popeye's health was deteriorating rapidly. He was suffering from esophageal cancer with metastasis to his lungs and liver. He was transferred several times to receive palliative care, first to a clinic, then to La Picota, and finally to the National Cancer Institute in Bogota. And it was there that what everyone saw coming finally happened and was inevitable. On February 6, 2020, at the age of 57, Jhon Jairo Velásquez Vásquez, known as Popeye, met his end. He died of cancer while serving a second sentence of 1 year and 8 months. These images might seem a bit harsh, but this is the reality of how Jhon Jairo spent his final days. His life, a story of extreme violence, survival in prison, and a controversial media resurgence, ended not by the bullets he used so often, but by an unrelenting disease. The story of the mafia general came to an end. According to reports, his remains rest in the Jardins Montesacro Cemetery in Itagüí, on the outskirts of Medellín. This cemetery is known for being the burial place of several notorious figures, including Pablo Escobar. The exact location of Popeye's grave was kept secret for some time, but journalistic investigations have revealed its whereabouts within the cemetery. In retrospect, the arithmetic of his life is striking and grim. More than 23 years during his first stint behind bars, less than 4 years of fleeting and controversial freedom, and less than 2 years in prison before his death. Popeye spent most of his life in prison, a fate that defined much of his identity and his final days. Freedom, when it finally came, was brief, tumultuous, and didn't give him enough time to truly enjoy it before cancer abruptly put an end to the controversial story of Pablo Escobar's Hitman. His life is a grim reminder of the high price paid in the underworld. A price that, for him, meant spending his days locked up and dying shortly after he had briefly glimpsed the outside world. That's the end of our amazing story for today. What did you think? Do you think living this kind of life was worth it? Were the fleeting luxuries really worth it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Until the next story.